Hello, everyone.
Hi.
We are here with, oh my gosh, okay. I'm gonna close some of these windows so I can see what we're doing. And, okay. Hi. Hi.
Hi.
So good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure, always.
So I'm here with Abby Burd. She is going to talk to us today a little bit about tips for preventing postpartum depression. Why don't we just start off with telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do in your area of specialty.
Sure. Well, wonderful. So I am a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist in San Diego. My specialty is perinatal mental health. So that encompasses postpartum depression, anxiety and mood disorders during pregnancy, loss, infertility. Like, it's a big umbrella term. It covers a lot, but certainly among those, the most well-known is now postpartum depression.
Great. And we are here talking about some tips for preventing postpartum depression.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what's coming up for you?
Thank you.
I'd love to hear more about that, and because it's going to be coming soon, you said. So tell us a little bit about.
It's live now.
Oh, well, then tell us all about it, and I'll put the links in the comments below so people can learn more about it.
And I made a coupon code for this.
Oh, we'll put it in.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so tell us about tips for preventing postpartum depression.
So, let's see.
The project.
Yeah. Well, can I give a little bit of background?
Yes, please. I'd love to.
So, earlier this year, the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, which is really like some of the most respected doctors in the country, got together and decided that postpartum depression clearly is a problem. But the good news is that you can prevent it. Can you believe it? So it's not even just treating it, it's preventing it from ever happening in the first place. Yeah. And so they looked at everything. They looked at diet, exercise, so many different modalities, medication, and the two things that made the biggest difference were actually two forms of counseling.
Wow.
Yeah, so one is CBT, which has to do with our thoughts, and the other was interpersonal psychotherapy.
Is this counseling while you're pregnant or counseling postpartum?
When you're pregnant or newly postpartum, to prevent ever getting the symptoms.
Got it.
And they looked specifically at people who are a little bit more at risk.
Okay.
But I'll just
and
jump
what are
into
the at-risk factors, actually?
Yeah, and then just to jump ahead to that, so 1 in 5 women are vulnerable to getting postpartum mood or anxiety disorders. Then that leaves another 3 that are having a really hard time. They just don't meet official diagnostic criteria. Right. And so I'm interested in helping the 4 out of 5 that are going to have a hard time with that transition.
Right.
So risk factors for the people in this study that were especially at risk is anybody who's had a previous history of depression or anxiety. If there is any kind of trauma with the birth or difficulty with the pregnancy, if there's previous loss, then of course you're going to be anxious during your pregnancy. You're worried about your baby. Right. And so those are some of the most common ones, and that's when they started using this counseling.
I see.
Preventative.
Got it.
And so what my new project is about is bringing it beyond just one-on-one talking, but to an educational course that anybody could take at home.
Okay.
So I love counseling. I never want to steer anybody away from counseling, but there are some barriers. So there's the cost. Right. There's childcare and driving there, the time it takes to get there. Right. There's the logistics.
Even finding a practitioner.
Finding someone who specializes in perinatal mental health.
Right.
Especially if you don't live in like a big city where they have a lot.
Right.
So those are some of the barriers, but the good news is those same skills that you can use one-on-one can use for a lot of people. Right.
Amazing.
And so I don't want to imply that it's a substitute for therapy, But so imagine
maybe it's like opening a door.
It's opening a door, and it's actual like skills and strategies you can use.
My questions.
Yeah. So say someone already has a therapist, but they don't actually specialize in perinatal mental health. Then they can bring the material in and work with their therapist, and they don't have to give up that relationship. And so that's the biggest difference. Is in therapy you're seen and you're heard, and it's a two-way conversation. And so this is a little bit more one-sided. It's education and information.
Got it. Which is so valuable, because as far as I'm concerned, awareness is the first key. And, when I was pregnant, I didn't even really have any awareness of the fact that I could be susceptible to postpartum depression.
I didn't know, and I work in the field.
Right. It's kind of, so I think just even the awareness and being able to talk about it and having some of those tools. And from my personal experience, I was, and we'll talk about this later, but I had more anxiety and OCD, but I didn't realize it until after the fact. It was kind of like, that now it makes sense. So I love the idea of just opening the door of awareness and talking about it more, and then possibly having, because if I even had the awareness, maybe I would have had the tools and gone to get counseling.
Right.
But I didn't even have the awareness.
And so when I think about the classes that my healthcare system provided to me when I was pregnant, there was, one child birth prep, one baby care basics. Right. There was a class for introducing your dog to the baby.
Wow.
Which is kind of cool,
but
also kind of narrow.
Right.
And so what if everybody across America and across the world got a class from their healthcare system? This is what you should watch out for. And so I think we're moving in the right direction, and my hope is that I can be part of that solution and part of bringing these tools to people.
I love that. So we'll put the link in the comments, and
it's 25% off.
Okay.
We'll put it, but it's easy. It's Ergo25. So ERGO 25. And so that's 25% off the course.
That's amazing.
And
Thank you.
There's future courses rolling out.
Cool.
Relationships after baby, a little bit more on loss. And then another package of skills and strategies, because I couldn't fit them all into one course.
Yes, of course.
So the coupon will be good it's across the board, my whole school.
Amazing. Well, thank you. So be sure to check it out. I'll mention it again later as well.
It's pretty easy, too. It's preventppd.com.
Preventppd.com. Okay, write it down. Okay, so let's kind of dive into a few of the questions. I have some questions that you guys gave us on Instagram and Facebook. But what is postpartum depression? And what's the difference between, say, postpartum depression and baby blues, or like I mentioned,
the anxiety. Yeah. So the baby blues affect maybe 80 to 90% of new moms.
Wow.
But the biggest thing is the time, the duration, and the severity. So the baby blues, typically, like a classic, is like 4 days after you have the baby.
There's the hormone.
It's the hormone drop.
Yeah.
And so moms might be a little weepier. They might be crying. They're also sleep deprived, so it's just not a surprise.
And exhausted from pushing a baby out or having a surgery.
They're depleted.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one difference, and this is good for anxiety, is if somebody can give you reassurance, like your loved ones, is like, yeah, you're doing a great job, and you feel better, then it's more in the normal range. But if your loved ones are giving you reassurance, it's okay, you're doing okay, and you still are worrying, like, your head and your body are still being activated, then that's a sign that you'd benefit from talking with someone to get a little bit more help around it. And then the duration. So baby blues typically is only 2 weeks. And I can't tell you how many people I've seen, like 7-8 months longer, and they're like, it's just the baby blues. And it's like, it's 2 weeks, then it's just worth talking to someone. And I know, like, my course has a diagnosis in the name, but I'm not big on diagnosing. I don't think you need to have a diagnosis. The question is, are you going through a transition? Are you going through a change? Could you benefit from support?
Yes, I think every mom can answer yes to all three of those questions. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and maybe, we'll jump ahead a little bit, but that you mentioned transition, and we were talking earlier about see if I say it right, matrescence.
Yes.
The idea that when you birth a baby for the first time, you also birth a mother. Mm-hmm. And that identity shift that you can't really prepare someone for, really. So what are some ways that, or, talk about that transition a little bit. And, also we live in a society, we don't have that village anymore.
That's so huge. And so if we look at like what is postpartum depression, I can talk about clinical stuff, but really it's a societal problem.
Right. Absolutely.
The problem with our society is that we're not supporting. I think you guys posted something. Lots of people want to hold the baby, but who holds the mother?
Oh, goosebumps! Yeah, it's so true.
So if you look at most traditional societies, there's a practice for 40 days, 6 weeks, a set amount of time that not just the mom, but the partner is also supported. They don't have to work. They just take care of the baby. Other people feed them. House chores, work. They don't have to do it.
Right.
Don't get me started on
our I am right there with you. We need to be taken care of. That's really important.
So to get back to matrescence. So matrescence comes from, really an anthropologist came up with the term, and so compared to adolescence.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
Adolescence is a time of transition for a teen where their identity, the way they relate to the world, the way they relate to others, the way they view themselves is just in a massive change.
Right.
And so really there's no other time in the life cycle of a woman that's so dramatic.
Right. That's a good way to look at it. I mean, we were talking earlier, like, I was like, why is it called matrescence? But then when it was the analogy of adolescence, oh, okay. Yeah. And thinking back, thinking way, way, way back to when I went through adolescence, that was a tough time.
Yeah.
And we talk about adolescence, but we don't talk about matrescence as much. We really don't.
All the focus is on the baby. It's that reverse Cinderella. Pregnant women have their maternity shoot, and everybody tells them they're glowing and beautiful. Yeah. And then after the baby's born, they might do a beautiful newborn shoot, and then the mom's like in the same sweats for 7 days, and just no one's taking care of her, and just like, you're okay. Let me see this baby.
Right. I see let's see. Oh, thank you for your comments. Along those lines, we talked about, women feeling shame and isolation around the fact that, we're expected to, have this glowing photo shoot, and then the pictures are supposed to be, oh, so happy, especially with, our social media society. Yeah. But a lot of women feel a lot of shame and isolation because they don't feel that postpartum glow.
Yeah.
Talk about, some strategies.
Sure.
How do we address that?
I think maybe if there's one thing people take from this talk is being easy on themselves. Lowering their expectations.
Absolutely.
Keep the child alive. And then maybe to start to do something for your basic needs.
Right.
I hate to say self-care because that even becomes another pressure.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. But I like to think of it a little bit like you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
So in order for me to feed my baby, I breastfed, so I had to drink water so that I could feed my baby.
So you could refill.
Exactly.
And so the same for your energy, for your love. If you think about the energy that you're devoting to this child, what energy is going into you? And so the other really big piece for this is developing your social support system. Thinking about it ahead of time.
Right. I say this on every live, but when people ask me who don't have kids, like, oh, my friend's about to have a baby, what should I get them? And I'm like, well, an ergo, of course, but really get them some food, start a meal train, don't bother with the onesies, just go over there and hold the baby for 20 minutes so mom can take a shower. So that whole idea of like, and women have a hard time asking for help.
So that's a really, I think that ties into the shame is we don't want to ask for help. We don't want to imply that we don't have it all together. Right. We don't want people to think that we're failing. Meanwhile, we're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm failing.
Right.
And so
asking for help is not failure at all.
Okay, I have an analogy for you.
I love it. I love an analogy.
So think of the CEO of a corporation, right? Do they do every single job in that company?
Of course not.
They delegate.
Of course.
So
Right. A successful CEO will always delegate. Yeah.
yeah.
Same
And
thing.
so if you are in charge of yourself and maybe you have some of that role in the family,
Right.
you need to delegate and bring in support.
Mhm.
And a good CEO will know when it's time to bring in an outside consultant.
Right.
And so that's really just what a therapist is an outside consultant.
Absolutely. A therapist, and also, we won't talk about it so much on this live, maybe another one, but a postpartum doula.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that was one thing that I wished I had done, was had maybe a postpartum doula for a couple days just to help with that transition. I remember seeing my baby and like, wait, you let me go home from the hospital? You know, it's pretty overwhelming.
It was hard. It was much harder than I thought.
Yeah.
It really did hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, for sure. So what are some tips for preventing postpartum depression? We touched on it a little bit. We have your course that we can refer people to, but can you give us a few tips for expecting moms who might be watching?
Yeah, so building up your support system and then talking to your support system ahead of time, like this could be hard, or what will be our plan when I can't take the sleep deprivation anymore. So kind of mapping that out ahead of time. Mapping out where the support groups are in your community, like getting a list. Try to find something you could do at least once every day to get out of the
La
house.
Leche League or a Gymboree baby class or something like that.
Yeah, mom and baby yoga, places where you can change a diaper, baby's crying, it's okay.
Yeah.
I think a lot of new moms are worried to go out if their baby's crying, or if they have a baby with colic or reflux, then they're ashamed and think everybody's judging them for being a bad mom. So I think letting go of the self-judgment and increasing the self-compassion.
Absolutely.
Well, it just helps all of us.
Right.
Anyway, but
Absolutely.
especially at this stage.
Yeah. And you mentioned this earlier, but I do think it's worth repeating is, letting go of expectations. I read somewhere that my serenity is inversely proportional to my expectations. So the more I let go of the dishes in the sink, the calmer I'll be. Like that laundry doesn't have to be done. The dishes don't have to be done.
So we want to talk a little bit about who's at risk. If someone has been super successful and competent at their job, and especially if you have perfectionistic traits, then you're super at risk for postpartum depression and anxiety, and it all goes back to those expectations. So, I like to think about, if you're used to doing 100%, you can have days where you're a B- mom. You're okay.
Right.
But I have a friend in San Diego named Renata. She has a wonderful Mommy and Me support group. And she says, no, let's go to batting averages. If you're batting 300, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like my two parenting mantras are, this too shall pass, and lower your expectations. For sure.
Yeah.
So we talked about tips. And what about resources if you are experiencing postpartum depression, or you think you might be experiencing postpartum depression? What resources are available out there?
Great. So great first place to start, no matter where you are in the world, is Postpartum Support International.
Okay, I'll put that link down below in the comments. Postpartum Support International. I'm going to look at these questions.
Yeah, TSI. And so they have a list worldwide of if it's not directly to counseling services, then it's to a regional representative who can connect you with local resources, support groups, and therapists. And then if you have to think about the finances when it comes to counseling too.
Right.
And so, counseling can kind of depend on what your insurance is.
Right.
And so sometimes calling up your insurance and say, do you have a specialist? But ask them specifically. And there are times when if an insurance network doesn't have a postpartum specialist in your area, they can do a single case agreement if you find someone who specializes it. So there are times where they can...
It's good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know. Okay.
So that's another tip.
Great. I'm seeing if... Oh, Rebecca, remember all the friends who said let them know if you need anything? They mean it. Call them. I would be over the moon if a friend asked if I could come and hold the baby or bring some milk. Yeah, absolutely. It's true. Your friends want to help you. Your friends and your family want to help you. I mean, family obviously can be tricky. Let's not open that,
So part of making a postpartum plan when you're pregnant is trying to figure out who do you want in your inner circle and who do you want to distance a little bit. And we all have people in our lives that maybe we want to bring in closer and bring in for more time. And there are people that we are going to set some limits.
Right.
Maybe have them be involved in a way that's meaningful for them, but still has some boundaries.
Right.
I think I gave an example, like maybe there's a family member that you really don't want to be there at the birth, but perhaps they have one of your old baby blankets when you were a baby. Right. And so talk to them about that. And of them maybe sending it in, it's a way for them to be connected in a way that still gives you some boundaries and some structure.
Absolutely.
Some safety.
And so many people talk about a birth plan, but we don't talk about a postpartum plan. That's going to be your next blog post, Abby, is how to write a postpartum plan. Yeah. I think it's a great, I never really thought of that before, and I've been around babies for a long time, and that's a great...
I think that's what I wanted to get at. I do that one-on-one, especially with moms who've had a previous episode of postpartum depression or anxiety, and they're pregnant again, and they don't want it to happen again. And so that's ultimately, that would be ideal if everybody can finish the course with a clear idea for them.
I love that.
Individualized.
So one of the questions we have here is, my youngest is 5 months old, and I feel like I should be over this. Is this normal?
Okay, so I don't love the word normal. Let's use the word common. So again, one in 5 are experiencing symptoms like this.
Yeah.
And then this also taps into what we're saying about expectations. Right. If this is hard, maybe you would benefit from having some support. Postpartum depression can pop up at 5 months. It can pop up years later.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's because people are not going in for help for that long. They've just been white knuckling through it.
Right.
And so
how many moms can relate to that? White knuckling through it. It's definitely
a little bit of the martyr. I mean, that's classic with moms. Like, I'll just do it.
Yeah. So then, postpartum depression can come up at any point. So even at 5 months, that could be something that's worth exploring.
I think the official the official is 1 year, but most of us in the field say 2 to 3, at least.
Right.
Still,
postpartum
onset.
Yeah, I think my daughter was definitely older when I had the onset, for sure. So let's talk a little bit, and we'll kind of wrap it up because we're coming to our time, but let's talk a little bit more. We mentioned it earlier, but the identity shift, that idea of, what are some of the, what are some things that moms can do, are there, like, if there's activities they enjoyed before they became a mom?
Yeah, so I was just talking to some friends who aren't even parents about the concept of putting things on the back burner. So imagine you have 4 burners on your stove, but you can really only keep your eye on the front 2. And then occasionally something has got to go on the back burner. And so most people prioritize this itty-bitty vulnerable creature, rightfully so, keeping them alive.
Right.
And then I think you said there's a question about balancing the need to make money
and
go to work.
Yeah, that was our, finish up with that. Yeah.
So there's realistic pressures.
Right.
And so I think taking care of ourselves and our identity tends to go on the back burner. Relationships tend to go on the back burner.
Yeah, we'll have you back to talk about that. Yeah. That's a big one. But talk a little bit about those, especially moms who do have to go back to work fairly soon postpartum. Those pressures of, I'm expected to raise the child, but I'm also expected...
Trigger for postpartum anxieties, going back to work the first time.
Absolutely.
Leaving the baby, trusting the caregivers, you pumping enough milk.
Right.
Just, the list goes on.
Right. So that would probably, thinking about your postpartum plan, if you do have to go back to work, that would be maybe a time to pull in some extra support.
Easing into it. So for that role transition, I love journaling. So journaling is a great way to reconnect with the parts of you that you loved from before you became a mom, so you don't forget them.
Right.
And you find a way to integrate them with aspects of your new identity that you do like.
I love that.
And so being intentional and spending some time to think about it.
Right. Not abandoning yourself, to focus on the child, but I love that idea, that thought of bringing pieces of your former identity into being a mother. Like I love cooking, so that's something that I can bring into being a mom.
It's still a work in progress. My kids are 5.5 and 7.5, and I'm just now starting to connect with more and more things, and there's more things I'm sure that'll take years for me to kind of loop back into, but it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, again, expectations.
Exactly. So this too shall pass, and lower your expectations. Yeah. We end on anything, and create a postpartum birth plan. So I'll put links below to the tips for preventing postpartum depression, and you can get a discount on the course with Ergo25, ERGO 25. And I'll also put the link to the postpartum support international,
the worldwide resources.
Absolutely. And Abby does frequently come on and write blog posts, so if you guys do have more questions after the live has ended, be sure to enter them in the comments, and we'll either have Abby swing back and answer them, or we can address them maybe in a stories or something in the future. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. This is so important, and I'm glad we're continuing to raise the awareness. So thank you.
Thanks, Kristen.
Okay. Let's try to end it. Bye, everyone.